My name is Caroline. I'm 47 years old, and I'm a real estate attorney from Minneapolis. 8 months ago, I was rushed to the hospital after a severe allergic reaction that came out of nowhere, or so I thought at the time. I was barely conscious when they wheeled me into the emergency room. My throat was closing. My blood pressure was crashing. Somewhere in the chaos, I heard my husband's voice, calm and reassuring, telling the nurses he would handle everything. The admissions clerk handed him a stack of papers to sign. Medical consent forms, insurance documents, the usual hospital bureaucracy. My husband grabbed the pen and started signing immediately, quickly, efficiently, barely glancing at what was in front of him. That's when the doctor stopped him. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, the attending physician who would later save my life in more ways than one, put her hand on my husband's arm and said 5 words that changed everything. "Sir, do you understand this?" She was pointing at a specific form, a form that, if signed, would have given my husband the legal authority to make all my medical decisions, including whether to continue life-saving treatment. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If stories about women who were saved by a stranger's instincts resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Drop your location in the comments. I want to know where all of you are watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this one ends. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I met Gregory Ashford at a legal conference in Chicago in the spring of 2002. I was 25 years old, 2 years out of law school, working as an associate at a small real estate firm in Minneapolis. The conference was my first. My boss had sent me to network and learn, which mostly meant I wandered between sessions feeling out of place among all the established attorneys with their expensive suits and easy confidence. Gregory was different. He was a financial advisor from a boutique wealth management firm, attending the conference to make connections with lawyers who might refer high-net-worth clients his way. He approached me at the coffee station during a break, and unlike the other men at the conference, he didn't look at my badge to check my firm's prestige before deciding whether to talk to me. "You look exactly as overwhelmed as I feel," he said, handing me a cup of coffee I hadn't asked for. "First conference? That obvious?" Only to someone else who's completely out of their depth. He smiled, and something in my chest loosened. "I'm Gregory. I've been pretending to understand tax law for the last hour, and I'm pretty sure I've permanently damaged my brain." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Caroline, I've been pretending to be interested in commercial zoning regulations, so we're probably even." We spent the rest of the conference together, skipping sessions to explore Chicago, talking for hours over deep dish pizza and too much wine. Gregory was smart, funny, and genuinely interested in my life in a way that felt rare and precious. He asked about my family, my dreams, my favorite books. He remembered details I mentioned in passing and circled back to them later. By the time the conference ended, I was half in love with him. "This doesn't have to end here," Gregory said at the airport, where we'd discovered our gates were right next to each other. "Minneapolis and Chicago aren't that far apart. I could come visit, or you could come here, or we could meet somewhere in the middle and pretend we're the kind of people who have romantic weekends in small towns." "I don't even know your last name," I said, though I was already smiling. "Ashford. Gregory James Ashford. I'm 31 years old. I've never been married. I have no criminal record, and I think you might be the most interesting person I've ever met." He pulled out a business card and pressed it into my hand. "Call me. Or don't. But I really hope you do." I called him that night. We dated long distance for a year before Gregory proposed. A year of weekend flights that I looked forward to all week. Of phone calls that lasted until 2 a.m. because neither of us wanted to hang up. of the slow, steady building of something that felt permanent and real. Gregory would fly to Minneapolis to meet my family. My mother adored him immediately. He brought her flowers every visit, asked about her garden, remembered the names of all her friends from the stories she told. My father was more cautious, the way fathers are, but even he admitted that Gregory seemed like a good man. "He looks at you like you hung the moon," my sister Rachel said after one of Gregory's visits. We were doing dishes together after a family dinner, Gregory in the other room playing cards with our father. "I've never seen anyone so completely in love." "I feel the same way about him," I admitted. "Is that crazy? We've only been together a year." "It's not crazy. It's what love is supposed to look like." She handed me a plate to dry. "Just don't rush into anything, okay? Make sure you really know who he is before you make it official." I thought I knew. I thought I understood Gregory completely. His ambitions, his values, his way of seeing the world. We talked about everything. Our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. He told me about his difficult relationship with his father, about the insecurities he'd carried since childhood, about his determination to build a life better than the one he'd come from. Or at least, that's what he told me. Looking back now, I wonder how much of it was real, and how much was just another carefully crafted story, designed to make me feel connected to him. I believed it. I believed everything. Gregory proposed on a weekend trip to the North Shore of Lake Superior. We'd driven up on a Friday, checked into a little inn overlooking the water, spent the day hiking trails that wound through forests just beginning to show their autumn colors. By sunset, I was tired and happy, expecting nothing more than a nice dinner and an early night. He took me to a restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. The sun was setting as we were seated, turning everything gold and pink and orange, like the whole world was celebrating something I didn't know about yet. Gregory was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his tie, the way his knee bounced under the table. I thought maybe he was stressed about work, about something he hadn't told me. I had no idea. After we ordered, he took my hand across the table and said, "Caroline, I need to tell you something." My heart dropped. This was it. He was breaking up with me. He'd met someone else. Or he'd decided long distance was too hard, or... "Meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me," he said. And then he was out of his chair and down on one knee, and there was a ring box in his hand, and I couldn't breathe. "I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life," he said, tears in his eyes. "I want to build a home with you, have children with you, grow old with you. I want everything with you, Caroline. Please say yes." I said yes before he finished speaking. The restaurant applauded. A stranger at the next table sent champagne. The sunset outside seemed to intensify, as if nature itself was blessing what we'd just promised each other. Everything felt perfect. Everything felt magical. Like a fairy tale, or a movie where you already know there's going to be a happy ending. Our wedding was elegant and intimate. 100 guests at a historic venue in St. Paul. Autumn leaves carpeting the grounds in red and gold. My father walked me down the aisle, trying so hard not to cry that his whole face was trembling. Rachel was my maid of honor, wearing a deep emerald dress that Gregory had helped me choose because he wanted everything to be perfect. Gregory's vows made everyone laugh first, then weep. He promised to love me, even when you're stressed about depositions and muttering legal precedents in your sleep. He promised to support my career, even when it means you're more successful than me, which, let's be honest, is probably inevitable. He promised to be my partner in everything, through sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death did us part. That last phrase, "until death did us part," I remember thinking how romantic it sounded, how permanent, how safe. I had no idea what it would come to mean. The first years of our marriage were happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Gregory moved to Minneapolis, finding a position at a local wealth management firm where his Chicago connections made him immediately valuable. Within 2 years, he was one of their top advisors, bringing in high net worth clients who trusted his judgment with their fortunes. I made partner at my law firm at 32, young for the industry, a testament to the long hours and dedication I'd poured into building my practice. Gregory celebrated like it was his own achievement, throwing a party, buying champagne, telling everyone who would listen how proud he was of his brilliant wife. We bought a beautiful home in Edina, a suburb known for its excellent schools, already planning for the children we'd have someday. It was a 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard and a swing hanging from the old oak tree, and I remember standing in the empty nursery thinking about the baby who would someday sleep there. Gregory handled our finances. He was the expert after all, the one who understood investments and tax strategies and all the complicated machinery of wealth. I trusted him completely. I signed whatever he put in front of me, barely glancing at the documents. Why would I scrutinize my own husband? When I got pregnant with our daughter Emma, Gregory was overjoyed. He painted the nursery himself, a soft yellow with white trim, and spent weeks researching everything: the safest car seats, the best pediatricians, the most up-to-date recommendations on everything from sleep training to baby-led weaning. "I want to do this right," he said when I teased him about his obsessive research. "She's going to be our everything. I want to give her the perfect start." Emma was born on a spring morning, 6 pounds, 12 ounces, with Gregory's dark hair and my green eyes. He held her in the delivery room and looked at me like I'd given him the entire universe. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You're perfect. We're going to be so happy, Caroline. I promise you, we're going to be so happy." 3 years later, our son Nathan was born, quieter than his sister, more serious, with a thoughtful expression that made everyone say he'd be a lawyer like his mother someday. Our family was complete. Our house was full of noise and chaos and love. I thought I knew exactly what the rest of my life would look like: raising our children, growing old with Gregory, retiring early to travel the world together, watching our grandchildren play under the same oak tree where our kids had swung. Looking back, I can see the hairline cracks that were forming even then, small inconsistencies I explained away, moments of coldness I attributed to work stress. Gregory could be distant sometimes, preoccupied, short-tempered in ways he hadn't been before. But everyone has bad days. Everyone goes through difficult seasons. I told myself it was normal. I told myself we were fine. I had no idea what was really happening. I had no idea what he was planning. The first time I noticed something was different, Emma was 8 and Nathan was 5. It was a Tuesday evening, and I'd come home early from work. Rare for me, but I'd been fighting a headache all day and decided to leave before a late meeting. Gregory wasn't there. His car was gone. The house was empty, and when I called his cell, it went straight to voicemail. This wasn't unusual. He often had client dinners or networking events. But something felt off that night, a prickling at the back of my neck I couldn't explain. He came home after 11, smelling like whiskey and something else, something floral, something feminine. "Client dinner ran late," he said before I could ask. "You know how it is with the high net worth crowd. They want to be wined and dined." "You smell like perfume." Gregory laughed, but something flickered in his eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell. She's 83 years old and wears enough Chanel to fill a department store. I swear the woman bathes in it." It made sense. Everything Gregory said always made sense. He had an answer for everything, a reasonable explanation for every inconsistency. So I pushed my doubts away and went to bed, but the doubts kept coming back. Over the months that followed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Gregory was working later and later, taking phone calls in the other room, becoming defensive when I asked simple questions about his day. "Why are you interrogating me?" he snapped one evening when I asked who he'd had lunch with. "I feel like I'm living with a prosecutor instead of a wife." "I just asked a question." "You're always asking questions, always suspicious. Maybe if you weren't so paranoid, our marriage would be happier." The word paranoid hit me like a slap. I wasn't paranoid, I was observant. There's a difference, one I was slowly learning to recognize. My sister Rachel noticed the changes before I admitted them to myself. We were at brunch one Sunday, the kids with Gregory at a soccer game, when she finally said what she'd been thinking. "Is everything okay with you and Gregory?" "Everything's fine," I said automatically. "Why?" "Because you don't seem fine. You seem tired, stressed. And Gregory," she hesitated, "he's different lately, less attentive, more distracted. At Emma's birthday party, I barely saw him talk to you at all. He's under pressure at work. The market's been volatile. He's managing a lot of anxious clients." "Maybe." Rachel didn't look convinced. "Just be careful, okay? I don't like how he's been treating you." "He treats me fine." But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Gregory had become shorter with me, more critical, more likely to dismiss my opinions or make me feel small in front of others. Little comments that seemed innocent but accumulated like snowflakes, each one weightless alone, together forming something cold and heavy. "Are you really going to wear that to the firm dinner?" he'd say, looking at a dress I'd spent an hour choosing. "It's a bit casual, don't you think?" "I'm not sure you're understanding the tax implications," he'd say when I tried to discuss our investments. "Let me handle this. It's what I do." "The kids need you at home more," he'd say whenever I mentioned a late case or an important client meeting. "I can't do everything myself, Caroline." The financial changes started around this time, too. Gregory had always managed our money. It made sense, given his profession, but I began noticing discrepancies I couldn't explain. Credit card statements that didn't match our lifestyle, cash withdrawals that seemed excessive, investment accounts I didn't recognize. "What's this account at Morgan Stanley?" I asked one evening, holding a statement I'd found in his office. Gregory's face went blank for just a second, then the mask slid back into place. "Client stuff. I must have accidentally mixed it in with our papers. Don't worry about it." "But it has your social security number on it." "I said don't worry about it." His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Why are you going through my things anyway? What happened to trust, Caroline?" He made me feel guilty for asking. He made me feel like I was the problem, nosy, suspicious, failing to trust the man I'd married. So I stopped asking. I stopped looking. I let Gregory handle everything while I focused on my career and our children, and pretended that the unease in my gut was just my imagination. The kids noticed too. Emma, at 10, had become sensitive to tension in ways that broke my heart. "Why does Daddy seem mad all the time?" she asked me one night at bedtime. "Daddy's not mad, sweetheart. He's just stressed from work." He yelled at Nathan for spilling juice. He never used to yell. Sometimes grown-ups have bad days. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you. I know. But she didn't sound convinced. I just wish he was nice like he used to be. Before. Even my 10-year-old daughter could identify a before and after in her father's behavior. A line she couldn't see but could feel, separating the daddy who used to play with her from the distant, irritable stranger who'd taken his place. Nathan, at 7, dealt with it differently. He became quieter, more withdrawn, less likely to seek Gregory's attention. He'd always been closer to me, But now he seemed almost wary of his father, watching him the way a small animal watches a predator. "Is Daddy going to leave?" he asked me once, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "Of course not, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "Tommy's daddy left. He said sometimes daddies just go away." "Your daddy isn't going anywhere." I pulled him close, stroking his hair. "I promise." I meant it at the time. I believed it. I had no idea that Gregory wasn't planning to leave. He was planning something much worse. The first major incident happened on our 15th wedding anniversary. Gregory had promised a special dinner at the restaurant where he'd proposed, a romantic trip back to the North Shore, just the two of us, to remember why we'd fallen in love. I'd arranged for my mother to watch the kids. I'd bought a new dress, the deep blue that Gregory had always said looked beautiful on me. I'd been looking forward to this trip for weeks, hoping it might be a turning point, a chance to reconnect with the man I'd married. The morning we were supposed to leave, Gregory came downstairs with his phone in his hand and an expression I couldn't read. "I can't go," he said. "Something came up at work. A major client is threatening to leave the firm unless I meet with him personally." "On our anniversary? Can't someone else handle it?" "No one else can handle a $50 million account, Caroline." His voice was cold, impatient. "I'm sorry, but this is just how it has to be. We'll reschedule." "That's what you said about my birthday, and about the kids' school play, and about—" "I'm not doing this." He grabbed his keys from the counter. "I have a business to run. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for you, but some of us have real responsibilities." Real responsibilities. As if my career, my partnership at a law firm, wasn't a real responsibility. As if raising our children while he worked late every night wasn't a real responsibility. He left. I sat at the kitchen table in my new dress and cried until my makeup ran and I couldn't cry anymore. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Gregory's home office. I told myself I was looking for the anniversary card I'd hidden there weeks ago, planning to give it to him at dinner. But that was a lie. I was looking for evidence. Evidence of what? I wasn't sure, but I knew something was wrong. And I needed to understand what. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Bank statements for accounts I'd never seen. Investment portfolios worth millions that weren't in my name. Credit card bills showing charges at hotels, restaurants, jewelry stores. None of which I'd ever visited or received gifts from. A second cell phone, hidden in the back of his desk drawer, that lit up while I was holding it with a text from someone named Victoria. "Missing you already. Tonight was perfect. Can't wait until you're free." Free, as in free from me. Free from our children. Free from the marriage he'd apparently decided was just an obstacle to be overcome. I stood there for a long time, the phone in my hand, trying to process what I was seeing. My husband was having an affair. That much was obvious. But it was the financial documents that scared me more, because they painted a picture of something beyond infidelity, something calculated and systematic. Gregory had been hiding money for years, moving assets into accounts I didn't know existed, building a financial life completely separate from our marriage, from me, from everything we'd built together. But why? We weren't in financial trouble. Our lifestyle was comfortable but not extravagant. Why would he need hidden accounts unless he was planning to leave and take everything with him? I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. I took photos with my own phone, documenting every statement, every account number, every piece of evidence. Then I went to bed and pretended to be asleep when Gregory finally came home at 2 a.m., smelling like wine and Victoria's perfume. The second major incident happened 3 months later. I'd been slowly, carefully gathering information, not confronting Gregory, not letting on that I knew anything, just building a file of evidence the way I would for any case. It was during this time that I noticed something else. Gregory had become increasingly interested in my health, not in a concerned way, in an oddly specific, almost clinical way. "You've been looking tired lately," he'd say. "Maybe you should see a doctor. Get some blood work done." "I scheduled you an appointment with Dr. Patel," he announced one day without asking me. "Just a routine checkup. It's important to stay on top of these things." "I increased your life insurance policy," he mentioned casually over dinner. "Just good planning. You never know what might happen." The life insurance comment should have alarmed me more than it did. But I was so focused on the affair, on the hidden money, that I didn't see the larger pattern emerging. I didn't understand that Gregory wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning something far more permanent. The allergic reaction came on suddenly, about 6 weeks later. I'd eaten dinner at home, a meal Gregory had cooked, which was unusual but not unheard of. He'd been making an effort lately, I thought, trying to be a better husband. Maybe the guilt from his affair was finally getting to him. Within an hour, my throat started to close. I knew I was allergic to shellfish, had been since childhood. It was the first thing I'd told Gregory when we started dating, back when restaurants and cooking together were still new adventures. He knew. He'd always known. He'd put shrimp paste in the sauce. He claimed later that it must have been cross-contamination at the grocery store, that he'd had no idea, that he was devastated. But I saw his face as I struggled to breathe, as I fumbled for the EpiPen I always kept nearby. I saw the way he watched me, calm and observant, like he was waiting to see what would happen next. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt your husband watching your distress with a little too much detachment, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The EpiPen saved my life, but I still ended up in the emergency room, still required hours of monitoring and medication. Gregory was attentive throughout, the perfect worried husband, holding my hand, speaking softly to doctors, doing everything right. But I remembered his face. I remembered the calm. I started being more careful after that, preparing my own food, checking ingredient labels obsessively, not eating anything that Gregory had touched unless I could verify every ingredient myself. He noticed. I'm sure he noticed, but he didn't say anything. Maybe he thought I was just being cautious after a scare. Maybe he was frustrated that his plan had failed. Maybe he was already planning his next move. I also started documenting everything. Every meal he prepared, every time he suggested I see a doctor or mentioned my health, every conversation about life insurance or estate planning. I kept notes in a private app on my phone, building a record of behavior I couldn't yet fully explain. My colleague at the firm, a woman named Patricia who specialized in criminal defense, noticed something was off. "You've been distracted lately," she said over lunch one day. "Is everything okay at home?" "Fine," I said automatically. "Just stress." "You're one of the best liars I know professionally," Patricia said, not unkindly. "But you're a terrible liar personally. Something's going on. You don't have to tell me what, but I'm here if you need someone." I almost told her then, almost spilled everything. The hidden accounts, the affair, the creeping suspicion that my husband might be trying to harm me. But it sounded insane even in my own head. My husband trying to kill me? That was the stuff of true crime podcasts, not my carefully constructed life. So I said nothing. I kept documenting. I kept watching. and I kept preparing my own food. The third incident, the one that landed me in the hospital for real, happened 2 months later. This time, I wasn't at home. I was at a work event, a celebration of a major case my firm had won. Gregory had insisted on coming, which was unusual. He normally avoided my work functions, claiming he felt out of place among all the lawyers. "I want to celebrate with you," he said when I expressed surprise. "This is a big deal. I should be there to support my wife." The event was at a rooftop bar downtown, one of those sleek, modern spaces with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and bartenders who knew how to make drinks I couldn't pronounce. I was mingling, accepting congratulations, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. Gregory brought me a drink from the bar, a gin and tonic, my usual, in the right kind of glass with the right number of lime wedges. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? He was my husband. We were at a party. He was being attentive. I took a sip, then another. The drink tasted normal, slightly bitter, the way gin always tastes, with that herbal brightness I'd always loved. Within 30 minutes, I was on the floor, unable to breathe. My heart racing so fast it felt like it would explode out of my chest. The room was spinning. People were screaming. Someone was calling 911. I remember Gregory's face hovering above me, calm and concerned in equal measure. I remember him speaking to the paramedics, giving them my allergies, my medications, my complete medical history, like he'd memorized it for exactly this moment. And I remember thinking, through the fog of whatever was happening, to me, he knows too much. He's too prepared, like he was expecting this. That's the last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital, tubes in my arms, machines beeping around me, and Dr. Amara Okonkwo standing at the foot of my bed with an expression I couldn't quite read. I was in the hospital for 3 days. The doctors couldn't immediately identify what had caused my reaction. It wasn't a straightforward allergic response, they said, but something more complex. They ran tests, drew blood, consulted specialists. Dr. Okonkwo was the attending physician assigned to my case. She was a small woman in her 50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. She asked me questions that went beyond the standard medical history, about my diet, my stress levels, my relationships. "How is your marriage, Mrs. Ashford?" she asked on my second day, her voice casual but her eyes watchful. "Fine," I said automatically. "Why do you ask?" "Just trying to get a complete picture." She made a note in my chart. "Your husband has been very attentive, very present, very eager to help with your medical decisions." Something in her tone made me pay attention. "Is that unusual?" "Not necessarily." She set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you feel safe at home?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. Did I feel safe? I thought about the allergic reaction at home, the one Gregory had caused. Accidentally, he said. I thought about the hidden accounts, the other woman, the way he'd been watching me lately like he was assessing something. "I don't know," I admitted. It was the first time I'd said it out loud. Dr. Okonkwo nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something she already suspected. "I'm going to order some additional tests," she said, "and I'm going to need you to be honest with me about everything you've eaten or drunk in the past 48 hours. The tests came back with results that changed everything. "Mrs. Ashford," Dr. Okonkwo said, closing the door to my room and sitting down in the chair beside my bed. "We found something in your blood work, a compound that shouldn't be there. It's consistent with a medication called digoxin, a heart medication that, in someone without a heart condition, can cause exactly the symptoms you experienced. I stared at her. I'm not on any heart medication. I know. That's what concerns me. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Digoxin doesn't occur naturally. Someone would have had to give it to you deliberately. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the bed, trying to stay grounded. At the event, I said slowly, Gregory brought me a drink, a gin and tonic. That would be consistent with the timeline. Dr. Okonkwo's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Ashford, Caroline, I need to ask you directly. Is it possible that your husband is trying to harm you? The question hung in the air between us. Is it possible? As if we weren't both already certain of the answer. Yes, I said. I think he is. I think he's been trying for a while. I told her everything. The first allergic reaction, the one Gregory had caused with shrimp paste in our kitchen, the hidden financial accounts I'd discovered, $3 million squirreled away in his name alone, the affair with Victoria, documented in texts and receipts and late-night absences, the life insurance policy he'd increased, the way he'd been behaving for the past year, slowly isolating me, making me doubt myself, setting the stage for something I couldn't quite name until now. But I don't understand, I said when I finished. If he wants to leave me, why not just get a divorce? We have a prenuptial agreement, yes, but he'd still walk away with something. Why go to all this trouble? Why risk everything on murder? Dr. Okonkwo regarded me thoughtfully. Your husband is a financial advisor. May I ask, what exactly does your prenuptial agreement specify? It protects my separate assets, property I owned before the marriage, my inheritance from my grandmother, and it gives me a significant share of any marital property in case of divorce. 60%, actually. I was already an attorney when we got married. I insisted on strong protections. And your life insurance policy, the one he increased. Who is the beneficiary? Gregory. He's the beneficiary on all my policies. He increased the coverage 6 months ago. He said it was just good planning, that if something happened to me, he'd need resources to take care of the children. I heard my own words as if from a distance. Good planning, taking care of the children. The phrases Gregory had used to justify a decision that now looked very different. If you divorce, Dr. Okonkwo said quietly, he gets 40% of the marital assets, minus whatever he's hidden. Given your prenuptial agreement, given the fraud he's already committed, his share would likely be reduced further once lawyers got involved. He might walk away with very little. But if I die? If you die while you're still married, he gets the life insurance payout, which he's recently increased. He gets your share of the estate, unless your will specifies otherwise. He gets whatever assets he's already hidden, and he gets to remarry, presumably to his mistress, as a wealthy widower rather than a disgraced divorcee. I sat with that for a long moment, turning it over in my mind. The math was horrifyingly simple. Divorce, Gregory loses almost everything he's worked to accumulate. My death, Gregory gains a fortune, a new wife, and a complete fresh start. The prenuptial agreement protects me in divorce, I said slowly. But it doesn't protect me if I die. Death bypasses everything I put in place to protect myself. That's often how these cases work, Dr. Okonkwo said. The spouse plans carefully, knowing that certain legal protections only apply if the victim survives. Your husband wasn't just trying to kill you, Mrs. Ashford. He was trying to kill you in a way that looked like natural causes, an allergic reaction, a heart condition, a tragic medical emergency. Something that wouldn't trigger an investigation. And if the poison didn't work fast enough, he would have had legal authority over your medical care. authority to tell us to limit treatment, to not resuscitate, to interpret any complication as a sign of a dying patient. Her voice was gentle but unflinching. If I had let him sign that form, you would almost certainly be dead right now. And no one would have known it was murder. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the bed, trying to stay grounded, trying to stay in my body when every instinct was screaming at me to flee. Gregory wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to kill me. And he'd been planning it for years, carefully, methodically, leaving nothing to chance. The financial fraud was preparation. The affair was his next chapter. And my death was the bridge between them. "We need to call the police," I said. "I've already contacted hospital security," Dr. Okonkwo told me. "And there's something else you should know. Something that happened when you were first admitted. Something you weren't conscious to witness." She told me about the forms, about Gregory's eagerness to sign everything the moment we arrived, barely glancing at the papers, not asking questions, not seeking clarification. About the way he'd moved through the stack with practiced efficiency, like he'd been rehearsing for this moment. And about the medical power of attorney form, the document that would have given him complete, unquestionable authority over every decision regarding my care. "I stopped him," Dr. Okonkwo said. "I asked if he understood what he was signing. He said yes, of course. He just wanted to make sure everything was taken care of. He didn't want any delays in my treatment. He was smooth, convincing. Every word he said was reasonable." "But you didn't believe him?" "No. I've been a doctor for 30 years. I've seen thousands of family members in crisis, panicked, terrified, barely able to speak, let alone sign documents. That kind of calm, that kind of efficiency, that absolute certainty about legal paperwork while your wife is dying in front of you." She shook her head. "It wasn't right. Something about it wasn't right. So I pulled the form out of the stack and told him we'd deal with it later, when you were stable. He would have had the power to tell us to stop treating you, yes, to withdraw care, to make it look like a medical decision rather than what it actually was. Murder. My husband had tried to murder me. And when the poison alone wasn't working fast enough, he'd tried to weaponize the hospital itself, to gain the legal authority to have doctors do his killing for him. "I need to talk to the police," I said again, more firmly now. "And I need a lawyer, a criminal lawyer, someone who specializes in this. I'm a lawyer myself, but I'm going to need someone who knows this territory." "There's a detective waiting outside," Dr. Okonkwo said. "She's been here since yesterday, when the blood work came back. I've told her everything I observed, but she needs to hear the full story from you." Detective Sarah Park was a small woman with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She sat beside my hospital bed with a notepad and asked me to tell her everything, from the beginning, leaving nothing out. I talked for 2 hours. I told her about the financial fraud, the affair, the 2 previous poisoning attempts. I told her about Gregory's behavior over the past year, the way he'd been slowly, systematically setting me up to be his victim. I gave her the photos I'd taken of the hidden accounts, the evidence I'd been gathering without fully understanding what I was gathering it for. "You may have just saved your own life," Detective Park said when I finished. "If you hadn't been documenting this, if you hadn't been paying attention, if Dr. Okonkwo hadn't stopped him from signing that form," I said, "that's what really saved me. I was unconscious. I couldn't advocate for myself. If she hadn't noticed that something was wrong—" "She says you're lucky," the detective said. "But I think it's more than luck. You knew something wasn't right. You trusted your instincts. Most victims never get that far." Most victims. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I was a victim now, a victim of attempted murder, of the man I'd loved for 15 years, of a marriage that had been nothing but a long con leading to my death. Gregory was arrested that evening, walking into the hospital with flowers and a concerned expression, ready to play the devoted husband for another day. The look on his face when the officers approached him, the flash of panic before the mask slammed down, told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't expected this. He'd thought he was smarter than everyone else. He'd been certain he would get away with it. He was wrong. The weeks following Gregory's arrest were a blur of police interviews, lawyer consultations, and the impossible task of explaining to my children that their father had tried to kill their mother. The first few days, I stayed at my mother's house. I couldn't go back to the home I'd shared with Gregory. Couldn't sleep in the bed where he'd lain beside me while planning my death. Couldn't cook in the kitchen where he'd prepared the meal that had nearly killed me the first time. My mother held me while I cried, made me tea I couldn't drink, watched over the children while I tried to process what had happened. I never liked him, my mother admitted one evening after Emma and Nathan had gone to bed. From the very beginning, there was something about him that felt performed, like he was playing a role instead of being himself. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? She shook her head. You were so in love, and he was so careful, so attentive, so charming, so exactly what you wanted him to be. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my instincts were wrong. Your instincts were right. I know, and I will never forgive myself for not trusting them. I didn't tell the children everything. They were too young for that. But I had to tell them something. Daddy wasn't coming home. Daddy had done something very wrong. Daddy was going to be away for a long time. Emma, at 12, understood more than I wanted her to. She'd been paying attention to the tension in our house, the way Gregory had changed, the distance that had grown between her parents. When I sat her down to explain, she looked at me with eyes too old for her face and said, "Is this why he was so mean? Because he was planning something bad?" "Yes, sweetheart. I think that's part of it." I knew something was wrong. She started crying then, my strong, observant daughter. I knew, Mom. I just didn't know what. I thought maybe you guys were going to get divorced. I didn't know. She couldn't finish the sentence. I held her for a long time, letting her cry, crying with her. My daughter had known something was wrong in our family, and had been carrying that knowledge alone. She'd been watching, worrying, trying to understand. And all the while, her father had been planning to make her motherless. Nathan, at 9, was quieter about it. He asked practical questions. Where would Daddy live? Would he come to his birthday party? Could they still play catch? And when I answered as gently as I could, he just nodded and went to his room. His therapist later told me he was processing it internally, working through feelings he didn't have words for yet. Children process trauma differently at different ages. Nathan needed time and space and the steady reassurance that I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere, that he was safe. Is Daddy going to come back? He asked me one night at bedtime, his small voice barely above a whisper. No, sweetheart. Daddy made very bad choices, and he has to face the consequences. He's going to be away for a very long time. Will he try to hurt you again? The question broke my heart. My 9-year-old son was worried about whether his father would try to kill me again. No, honey. Daddy is in a place where he can't hurt anyone, and there are people, police officers, judges, lawyers, whose job it is to make sure he stays there. I'm safe now. You're safe. We're all safe. He nodded, seeming to accept this, and closed his eyes. But I sat beside his bed for a long time afterward, watching him sleep, marveling at his resilience and mourning the innocence he'd lost. The criminal case against Gregory was strong, and getting stronger with each passing week. Detective Park and her team were thorough, methodical, leaving no stone unturned in their investigation. Detective Park and her team traced the digoxin to a prescription that Gregory had obtained using forged documents. He'd created a fake identity, a fake medical history, a complete paper trail for someone who didn't exist. The pharmacy that filled the prescription was horrified. They hadn't suspected a thing. The financial fraud was equally damning. Forensic accountants found nearly $3 million that Gregory had hidden over the years, siphoned from our joint accounts and funneled into investments held in his name alone or in the name of shell companies. He'd been planning to leave me with nothing, worse than nothing, actually, since he'd also taken out loans against our home that I hadn't known about. Victoria, the other woman, was questioned extensively. She claimed she hadn't known about the murder plot, and I believe her. Gregory was too smart to involve anyone who might talk. She'd thought she was dating a man in a loveless marriage, someone who would divorce his wife as soon as the timing was right. She hadn't known that the right timing he was waiting for was my death. The most disturbing discovery came from Gregory's computer. Hidden files, encrypted with a password that the FBI eventually cracked, containing research on untraceable poisons, on symptoms that mimic natural heart failure, on how to appear as a grieving widow without arousing suspicion. He'd been planning this for at least 2 years. Not just hiding money, not just having an affair, but actively researching how to kill me and get away with it. There were drafts of eulogy speeches. There were floor plans for the house he planned to buy with Victoria after I was gone. There was a document titled Timeline, outlining his plan in meticulous detail. The gradual poisoning, the eventual fatal dose, the hospital visit where he'd play the devoted husband, the medical power of attorney that would allow him to end my life legally if the poison didn't work fast enough. Dr. Okonkwo's intervention had stopped him at the final step. "You were 3 days away from death," the prosecutor told me during one of our meetings. "Maybe less. The digoxin was building up in your system. If he'd gotten control of your medical decisions, if Dr. Okonkwo hadn't been paying attention, you wouldn't be sitting here right now." The realization was staggering. I'd been 3 days from death, not in some abstract theoretical way, but concretely, specifically. My husband checking items off a list as he moved toward my murder. The divorce proceedings happened simultaneously with the criminal case. With Gregory in jail awaiting trial, the process was complicated but ultimately straightforward. The prenuptial agreement held, all his claims to my assets were voided by his fraud, and the assets he'd hidden were gradually traced, frozen, and returned. I got the house. I got full custody of the children. I got most of what remained of our savings once the forensic accountants had finished untangling Gregory's web of deceit. And Gregory got nothing. Nothing except a cell in the county jail and a future measured in years of imprisonment. "It's not enough," my sister Rachel said when I told her about the divorce settlement. "Nothing will ever be enough for what he did." "I know," I said, "but it's something. It's my life back. It's my children safe. It's him unable to hurt anyone else." That would have to be enough. That would have to be justice. The trial began in February, almost a year after my hospitalization. I'd been dreading it for months, the thought of sitting in the same room as Gregory, of seeing his face, of hearing whatever lies his defense attorney would try to spin. But I'd also been preparing. Hours with the prosecutor, reviewing evidence, practicing my testimony. Sessions with my therapist, working through the trauma, building the emotional resilience I'd need to face him in court. Conversations with my children, explaining as gently as possible that Mommy would have to talk about what Daddy had done, and it might be in the news, and people might say things at school. Emma, at 12, was old enough to understand most of it. "I want to be there," she said when I told her the trial date. "I want to watch." "Absolutely not," I said. "You're too young, and some of what they'll discuss is too disturbing. When you're older, if you want to read the transcripts—" "I want to see him," she interrupted, and there was something hard in her voice that made me pause. "I want him to see me watching him get convicted." I understood the impulse. I felt it too. The desire to witness justice, to make sure he saw the faces of the people he'd betrayed. But she was 12 years old. Some things weren't meant for 12-year-olds. In the end, Rachel sat with the kids at home while I went to court. Every evening, I'd come back and tell them what had happened. Sanitized versions, appropriate details, the slow march toward a verdict they needed to understand. The morning of my testimony, I woke up feeling strangely calm. I put on a navy suit, professional but not severe, and minimal makeup. I wanted to look like what I was: a successful attorney, a devoted mother, a woman who had trusted her husband and nearly paid for that trust with her life. Gregory was already at the defense table when I arrived. He looked smaller than I remembered, grayer, thinner, the months in jail carving away at the polished exterior I'd once found so attractive. His lawyer had put him in a charcoal suit, the kind of thing he used to wear to client meetings. It didn't fit as well anymore. When our eyes met across the courtroom, he tried to hold my gaze, tried to communicate something maybe, an apology, a plea, another manipulation. I looked away before he could see anything in my face. The prosecution's case was systematic and devastating. They'd been building it for months, assembling evidence like pieces of a puzzle that revealed a picture I could barely stand to look at. They started with a financial fraud. A forensic accountant took the stand and walked the jury through years of deception. The hidden accounts, the shell companies, the careful siphoning of funds from our shared life into Gregory's secret one. Charts showed the money flowing, from our joint accounts to offshore holdings to investments I'd never known existed. $3 million. $3 million stolen from our marriage, from our children's future, from me. The jury's faces shifted as the numbers accumulated. Disbelief became disgust, became cold anger. Then the prosecution turned to the poisoning. The toxicologist explained digoxin in terms a layperson could understand. What it was, what it did, why someone without heart disease should never have it in their system. She described my symptoms, the levels in my blood, the timeline that traced from the drink Gregory had given me to my collapse 23 minutes later. "In your expert opinion," the prosecutor asked, "was the digoxin in Mrs. Ashford's system the result of accidental exposure?" "No," the toxicologist said firmly. "The concentration was too specific, too precisely calculated. This was deliberate." They presented the forged prescription, the pharmacy records, the fake identity Gregory had created, a complete person with a medical history and a need for heart medication. All of it fabricated so that he could obtain the drug he would use to kill me. They showed his search history. Undetectable poisons, symptoms of heart failure, how to appear as grieving widower. Every word he'd typed into his laptop, thinking no one would ever see it, now projected on a screen for the jury and the packed gallery and everyone to witness. And they presented the timeline document, his murder plan, laid out in his own words, with dates and milestones and contingency plans. It was meticulous. It was comprehensive. It was the work of a man who had thought very carefully about how to kill his wife and get away with it. The courtroom was completely silent as the prosecutor read excerpts. Even Gregory's defense attorney, who had heard all this before in discovery, looked uncomfortable. Some things are indefensible, and we were all watching one of them unfold. Dr. Okonkwo testified next, and her testimony was perhaps the most powerful of all. Something didn't feel right, she told the courtroom. In my experience, when a patient is rushed in with a medical emergency, the spouse is usually panicked, overwhelmed, asking questions, trying to understand what's happening. Mr. Ashford was calm, too calm, and he was too eager to sign forms without reading them. What specifically concerned you about his behavior? The prosecutor asked. The medical power of attorney form. It's a serious document. It gives the signer control over life and death decisions. Most people want to understand it, want to know what they're agreeing to. Mr. Ashford picked up that form and started signing it like it was a routine credit card receipt. She paused. That's when I asked him if he understood what he was signing, and the look on his face, for just a second, was not the look of a worried husband. It was the look of someone who'd been caught. And what did you do then? I pulled the form out of the stack and told him we'd deal with it later, when his wife was stable. He argued briefly, said he just wanted to make sure everything was taken care of, but I'd already decided I wasn't letting him near that form. Dr. Okonkwo, in your medical opinion, what would have happened if Mr. Ashford had been granted medical power of attorney over his wife that day? She looked at Gregory, then at me, then at the jury. Based on the levels of digoxin in her system, Mrs. Ashford was going to go into cardiac arrest within the next 2 to 3 days. If her husband had had the authority to make medical decisions, he could have instructed us to limit treatment, to not resuscitate, to interpret any complications as signs of a dying patient, rather than a woman being poisoned. Her voice was steady. In my opinion, if I had let him sign that form, Caroline Ashford would be dead right now. The courtroom was completely silent. When they called me to testify, I walked to the witness stand feeling strangely calm. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, rehearsing my story, practicing staying composed under cross-examination. But when I finally sat down and faced the courtroom, I realized I didn't need to practice composure. I was composed. I was telling the truth, and the truth gave me strength. I told them about our marriage, the happy years and the slow decline. I told them about the red flags I'd noticed and the ones I'd missed. I told them about finding the hidden accounts, the other woman, the signs that should have warned me something was terribly wrong. Mrs. Ashford, the prosecutor said, when did you first realize that your husband was trying to kill you? In the hospital, after Dr. Okonkwo told me about the digoxin. Before that, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't see the full picture. I was still making excuses for him, still trying to believe there was some innocent explanation. I paused. The night I found the hidden accounts, I remember thinking he was just planning to leave me. I was devastated by that. The idea that he was actually planning to murder me, I couldn't have conceived of it. It was too monstrous. And now? Now I understand that the man I married never really existed. Gregory was a performance, a mask. Underneath was someone willing to kill for money, willing to leave his own children motherless, willing to watch me die rather than give up his lifestyle. I looked at Gregory then, for the first time since the trial began. I don't hate him. I don't feel anything for him anymore. He's just a stranger who tried to kill me. That's all he is now. Gregory's defense attorney tried to shake me on cross-examination. He suggested that I'd been paranoid, suspicious, that I'd misinterpreted innocent behaviors. He suggested that the hidden accounts were just prudent financial planning, that the affair was a symptom of an unhappy marriage, that the digoxin could have come from some other source. Mrs. Ashford, isn't it true that your marriage was struggling? That you and your husband had grown apart? We had grown apart, I agreed, because my husband was having an affair and planning to murder me. That does tend to create distance in a marriage. The gallery laughed. Gregory's attorney flushed. And these financial accounts you claim were hidden, Couldn't they simply have been investments your husband made on your behalf without explaining every detail? $3 million in accounts he never mentioned to me, held in names of shell companies, opened during the same period he was researching how to poison me without being caught? No, that's not prudent financial planning. That's preparation for murder. The verdict came after less than a day of deliberation. Guilty on all counts: attempted first-degree murder, poisoning with intent to harm, financial fraud, conspiracy. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following month. When the foreman read the verdicts, I watched Gregory's face. I expected anger, maybe, or despair. Instead, I saw something almost like resignation. He'd known this was coming. He'd known, since the moment Dr. Okonkwo stopped him from signing that form, that his plan had failed. He was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He didn't look back at me. He didn't say anything, and I felt nothing but a profound, exhausted relief that it was finally over. Gregory was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The courtroom was packed for the sentencing hearing. Family members, colleagues, reporters, curious strangers who'd followed the case in the news. I sat in the front row with Rachel beside me, her hand holding mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. The judge, Honorable Catherine Morrison, a silver-haired woman known for her tough sentences and violent crimes, read her statement in a voice that carried to every corner of the room. "Mr. Ashford," she said, looking at Gregory with undisguised contempt, "in my 24 years on the bench, I have seen many terrible things. I have sentenced men who killed in anger, in passion, in moments of terrible judgment. But I have rarely seen a crime as calculated, as cold-blooded, and as utterly devoid of the love you claim to feel for your family." Gregory sat motionless at the defense table. His lawyer had told him to show remorse, I'm sure, to look down, to appear humbled, but Gregory's face was blank, empty. The mask had finally slipped completely. "You didn't just try to kill your wife," Judge Morrison continued. "You betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way possible. You used your knowledge of her health, her vulnerabilities, her complete faith in you as her husband, to poison her repeatedly over a period of months. You forged prescriptions. You researched undetectable methods. You created an elaborate plan to make her death look natural while you collected her life insurance and married your mistress." The judge paused, letting her words sink in. "And when the poison wasn't working fast enough, when your wife arrived at the hospital still breathing, still fighting, you tried to obtain the legal authority to end her treatment yourself. You tried to use the medical system as a murder weapon. If not for the intervention of a vigilant physician, you would have succeeded." She turned to look at me then, a brief glance of acknowledgement, of solidarity, then back to Gregory. "The court sentences you to 35 years in the state penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 25 years. You are to have no contact with your children except as they may choose to initiate when they reach adulthood. You are ordered to pay full restitution for the funds you fraudulently concealed from your wife, and you are prohibited from profiting in any way from the publicity surrounding this case." 35 years. He'll be in his mid-80s before he's even eligible for parole. By then, Emma will be middle-aged. Nathan will have lived an entire adult life. I'll be old if I'm still alive, but I will have lived. I will have seen my children grow up, graduate, find love, maybe have children of their own. That's what Gregory tried to steal from me. Not just my life, but all the life that would have followed. Every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday. Every moment I would have missed if Dr. Okonkwo hadn't stopped him. I'm alive. That's what matters. I'm alive. The divorce was finalized shortly after the criminal trial. With Gregory convicted, there was nothing to contest. The prenuptial agreement held in its entirety. The hidden assets were returned to me through court order, and I was awarded full custody of our children without even a whisper of a fight. I sold the house in Edina within a month of the verdict. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many memories had curdled into something toxic, and every room reminded me of the man who had smiled at me over breakfast while planning my death. We moved to a smaller place in Minneapolis proper, closer to my office, closer to good public transit for the kids, closer to a fresh start. The new house was different in every way from the old one. Modern where the other had been traditional. Bright and open where the other had been formal and compartmentalized. The kids got to pick their bedroom colors. Emma chose a deep teal that she said felt like the ocean, while Nathan went for a forest green that reminded him of summer camp. We were building something new, something that belonged to us. Victoria, Gregory's mistress, reached out to me once after the trial. An email, carefully worded, expressing her horror at what Gregory had done and her sincere regret for any role she might have played. She claimed she hadn't known. She'd believed his lies about our marriage, the cold wife, the loveless home, the man trapped in a relationship he couldn't escape. She'd thought she was rescuing him. She'd had no idea what he was really planning. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She'd been sleeping with my husband while he was actively trying to kill me. Maybe she was truly innocent, just another of Gregory's victims. Maybe she was complicit, turning a blind eye to signs she didn't want to see. Either way, I had no interest in absolving her guilt or soothing her conscience. She moved to Arizona a few months later. I never heard from her again. Dr. Okonkwo stayed in touch. We have coffee once a month now. She's become not just my savior, but my friend. The woman who noticed that something was wrong, who trusted her instincts, who asked the question no one else thought to ask. I almost didn't say anything, she told me once. I almost just let him sign the form. It would have been easier, less confrontational, less awkward. But something told me not to. Something told me to wait. I'm glad you listened to that something. So am I. She smiled. 30 years of medicine, and that's the lesson I still haven't fully learned. Trust your instincts. They know things your conscious mind hasn't figured out yet. The children are healing slowly. Emma is in high school now, focused on academics and a small circle of close friends who know pieces of her story, but not the whole thing. She sees a therapist weekly and has developed a maturity that sometimes breaks my heart. No teenager should have to be this strong. Nathan is more outwardly resilient, but inwardly fragile. He rarely speaks about his father. When he does, it's with a detached curiosity, like Gregory is a character in a story, rather than someone who used to tuck him in at night. His therapist says this is a defense mechanism, a way of protecting himself from feelings that are too big to process yet. He'll deal with it in his own time. Neither child has visited Gregory in prison. Neither has asked to. Maybe someday they'll want to understand, to hear his side, to make peace with what he did. But that's their choice to make, in their own time, on their own terms. I started dating again last year. It took a long time, years, before I could trust anyone enough to even consider it. But I met someone through work, a widower named David, who understands what it's like to lose the life you thought you'd have. We're taking it slowly, carefully. Neither of us in any rush to define what we're building. I'm scared, I told him on our third date. I trusted Gregory completely, and he tried to kill me. How do I ever trust anyone again? You don't trust completely, David said. Not at first, not for a long time. You trust in pieces, gradually, as someone earns it. And you pay attention. You listen to your instincts. You never again let anyone convince you that what you're seeing isn't real. It was good advice. It's advice I try to follow every day. I'm still a lawyer, still a partner at my firm, still building cases and winning arguments and doing the work I love. But I'm different now. Harder in some ways, softer in others. I pay attention to things I might have overlooked before. I trust my gut even when it's uncomfortable. And I'm alive. Against all odds, despite everything Gregory planned, despite the years of manipulation and the carefully orchestrated murder attempt, I'm still here, still breathing, still building a life worth living. That's victory. That's justice. That's enough. The children are healing, slowly. Emma is in high school now, focused on academics and a small circle of close friends who know pieces of her story, but not the whole terrible truth. She sees a therapist every week, a kind woman named Dr. Patterson who specializes in adolescents who've experienced trauma, and has developed a maturity that sometimes breaks my heart. No teenager should have to be this strong. She wants to be a doctor, she told me recently. Not a general practitioner, but a psychiatrist, someone who helps people understand their own minds. I want to know why people do bad things, she said. I want to understand how someone can seem normal and be so broken underneath. I don't have answers for her. Maybe she'll find them someday. Maybe some things can't be explained, only witnessed and survived. Nathan is more outwardly resilient but inwardly fragile. He excels in school, plays on the soccer team, has friends who come over for video games and pizza. On the surface, he's a perfectly adjusted 12-year-old, doing all the things 12-year-olds do. But sometimes I catch him watching me with a worried expression, like he's checking to make sure I'm still breathing. Sometimes he won't let me out of his sight, following me from room to room, needing to know where I am at all times. His therapist says this is hypervigilance, a common response to trauma. His brain learned that people he loves can be taken away without warning, and it's working overtime to make sure that doesn't happen again. It'll get better, she assures me. Give him time. Give him consistency. Give him the unshakable certainty that you're not going anywhere. I try. Every day, I try. Neither child has visited Gregory in prison. Neither has asked to. Maybe someday they'll want to understand, to hear his side, to ask him why. But that's their choice to make, in their own time, on their own terms. I won't push them toward forgiveness, and I won't stand in the way if they seek it. I started dating again last year. It took a long time, years, before I could trust anyone enough to even consider it. The idea of letting someone into my life, into my children's lives, felt impossible. How could I ever trust anyone again after what Gregory had done? But I met someone. David, a widower I encountered through a support group for parents dealing with trauma. He lost his wife to cancer, not violence, but he understands what it means to grieve a life that ended before it should have. We're taking it slowly, carefully, neither of us in any rush to define what we're building. I'm scared, I told him on our third date, sitting across from him at a quiet restaurant where no one knew our stories. I trusted Gregory completely, and he tried to kill me. How do I ever trust anyone again? You don't trust completely, David said. Not at first. Not for a long time. Maybe not ever. But you trust in pieces, gradually, as someone earns it. And you pay attention. You listen to your instincts. You never again let anyone convince you that what you're seeing isn't real. It was good advice. It's advice I try to follow every day. I'm still a lawyer, still a partner at my firm, still building cases and winning arguments and doing the work I love. But I'm different now. Harder in some ways, softer in others. I pay attention to things I might have overlooked before. I trust my gut even when it's uncomfortable. I ask questions even when the answers might be things I don't want to hear. And I'm alive. Against all odds, despite everything Gregory planned, despite the years of manipulation and the carefully orchestrated murder attempt, I'm still here, still breathing, still building a life worth living. That's victory. That's justice. That's enough. If I've learned anything from this experience, it's that the people we trust most can be the ones we should fear most. Gregory was my husband for 15 years. He knew my allergies, my health history, my financial assets, my daily routines. He knew everything he needed to know to destroy me, and he almost did. The intimacy of marriage can be a gift. It can also be a weapon. I've also learned to trust my instincts, even when they're inconvenient. Every red flag I noticed during our marriage, every late night, every unexplained absence, every moment when something felt wrong, my gut was trying to warn me. I explained it away because confronting it was harder than ignoring it. I made excuses for Gregory because making excuses was easier than facing the truth. Don't make my mistake. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If your partner is suddenly interested in your health, your life insurance, your medical history, pay attention. If they're hiding money or having unexplained absences or becoming distant and critical, pay attention. If your instincts are screaming that something is wrong, listen to them. They might save your life. The healing journey continues. There are still nights when I wake up remembering that hospital room. That moment when I realized my husband had tried to kill me. The trauma doesn't disappear just because justice was served. It embeds itself in your nervous system, surfaces at unexpected moments, colors everything in ways you don't always recognize. But it gets better. Slowly, painfully, with time and therapy and the support of people who love you, it gets better. The fear recedes. The trust rebuilds. The life you thought was over reveals itself to be just beginning a new chapter. My children are growing up without their father, and that will always be a wound. But they're also growing up knowing that their mother fought for them, survived for them, refused to let a monster take their family. That's not nothing. That's something they'll carry with them forever. If you're watching this, and something in my story feels familiar, if you're in a marriage where you feel unsafe, unseen, or suspicious of changes you can't explain, please trust yourself. Document what you can. Tell someone you trust. Make a plan. And if you ever end up in a hospital with a spouse who seems a little too eager to sign your medical forms, remember Dr. Okonkwo. Remember that sometimes the person who saves your life is a stranger paying attention when something doesn't feel right. Thank you for watching my story. If it resonated with you, if it made you feel less alone or more aware, please subscribe to this channel for more stories of women who survived. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, and leave a comment telling me your thoughts. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Trust your instincts. Pay attention to the red flags. And remember, doctors do more than treat bodies. Sometimes they save lives in ways no medicine can explain.